Our question, Rick, this morning is, so what about abortion? And our theme text is found in Psalms 139, verse 14. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works that I know very well.
And, Jonathan, in America, we, according to our founding fathers, cherish life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, over the last 230 or more years, we as Americans have defined and redefined these things to fit into our perspectives. As we cherish life, our defining of life has become a major and dividing issue. When does life begin? When should life be protected? Do the rights of a woman override the right to life of an unborn child? Yes, this morning we're going to take some time and examine that difficult, emotional, and ever-divisive question of abortion. This is not an easy question, and one that we here at Christian Questions do not love talking about. Yet we are compelled to put it on the table from a respectful and a biblical perspective. So, what about abortion? Let's talk.
Well, Rick, we have 3 questions for consideration. The first question is, what is abortion?
Secondly, how prevalent is abortion?
And third, what biblical principles can we apply to this issue?
And, Jonathan, as we go through this, I think the question number 3 is going to be sort of overriding throughout the entire discussion, and we're not going to wait until we get to that question to address it. But we do want to focus on those first 2 questions at the beginning. First question is, what is abortion? And as we go through this, folks, we're going to ask you if you do want to call in to just hold off until at least the first segment is over with so we can just put some groundwork out here. Jonathan, the dictionary definition of abortion is what?
The termination of a pregnancy after, accompanied by, resulting in, or closely followed by the death of the embryo or fetus, as a spontaneous expulsion of a human fetus during the first 12 weeks of gestation. Compare miscarriage. Induced expulsion of a human fetus, expulsion of a fetus by a domestic animal, often due to infection at any time before completion of pregnancy.
All right, so it's the bottom line, it's the termination of a pregnancy, and that results in the death of an embryo or fetus. All right, and really that's what we're talking about. Now, abortion is legal in America, and we'll get into that in a little while. And for the next few minutes, and I've already apologized to Jonathan, and I will apologize to you ahead of time. We're just going to list off some of the processes, some of the procedures that are used to perform abortions. Now, as we do this, folks, I'm going to suggest that if you have children that you like to have listen to the program, this is not really good for them at this point. So until the end of the first segment, I think that it's better to not have them have to hear this. This is definitely adult talk here in terms of defining abortion procedures. Having said that, Jonathan, the first one is called dilation and, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, curettage. It's D&C. What is it?
The doctor dilates the cervix and uses a hoe-like instrument to cut the baby's body to pieces and scrape the uterine wall. The body pieces and contents of the uterus are then pulled through the cervix.
All right, the second is suction, and that is the doctor inserts a vacuum tube using a special medical device, many times more powerful than a home vacuum cleaner, through the cervix into the uterus, tearing the live baby and the placenta into pieces. These pieces are sucked into a jar or a bucket.
The third is saline. A strong salt solution is injected through the mother's abdominal wall into the amniotic fluid in the uterus. The salt burns the baby's skin as it absorbs the solution, and the baby also swallows the salt, causing internal poisoning and burning. The baby, in great pain, thrashes about, which is painful to the mother. She goes into labor and expels a shriveled, burned baby. Some babies are born alive after a saline abortion.
The next procedure is called, and again I'm not sure of how to pronounce it, prostaglandin, and it's this chemical, a hormone, is injected or applied to the uterus, causing it to contract violently. It is a painful abortion for the mother, forcing the baby out prematurely.
The fifth, dilation and
evacuation.
Thank you, evacuation.
And that's called D&E.
The doctor dilates the mother's cervix and uses a forceps to crush the baby's head and pull out body parts.
Okay, and then finally, number 6 is DNX, or dilation and extraction, and this is also known as partial birth abortion. And this procedure, it says, is known in the media as partial birth abortion. The doctor dilates the mother's cervix, pulls the baby's body out except for the head, leaving the head inside the mother's body. The doctor uses the point of the scissors to make a wound at the base of the baby's skull and opens the scissors to make the opening larger. A vacuum tube is then inserted into the baby's skull to suction out the brain to be used in fetal tissue research. The baby must be alive at the time the brain matter is harvested for research purposes. With the brain gone, the head collapses and is pulled out of the mother's body more easily. Okay, we're done with that. We don't need to go through that again. It's over. The reason we did it is because when you talk about something as important as the subject of abortion, and important as the subject of life, you need to get down to the bottom line, and we wanted to waste no time getting there so we can say, okay, now what do you do with it? Now, again, folks, this is, and I'm not saying anything new, this is legal. This is something that nationally is an acceptable practice. So one of the things as we go through this subject and we look at this legal practice is we got to begin to ask ourselves, because it's legal, does that make it right? Because it's legal, does that make it the thing that you should be looking to do? Because it's legal, does that make it so that we can hide behind its legality if our conscience may say something different? Those are the parts of this discussion, I think, that we really want to get into this morning. And Jonathan, as we begin to pursue this, let's take a few minutes and let's look at some statistics. Okay, we've got some statistics, and my printer didn't print them out quite right, but they came from historical abortion statistics from William Robert Johnson. There was a website, and I didn't put the website down, but what it does is it gives a numerical listing of abortions in the United States. I didn't go through the worldwide thing because we're dealing with life here. Statistics starting with as early as 1960, and obviously these are only reported abortions. But Jonathan, how many abortions per 1,000 live births were there in 1960?
The 0.07?
That's the one, 0.07. In 1960, and that statistic stayed between 1960 through 1962 about 0.07. What that boils down to is about 1/100th of a percent of babies were aborted in the very, very early 60s. About 1/100th of a percent, which would have boiled down to probably less than 300 per year total. Okay, now these are reported, obviously. Now, what do you see happening as you go through the early 60s here?
Things start to increase.
Okay, there's kind of a slow rise.
Mm-hmm.
You go from, for instance, in 1962, you go from 292. In 1963, there's 390. Then it goes to 800, then 800, then 1,000, then 2,000, then 4,000. Now, what happens between 1968 and 69?
Big jump, 23,000.
Okay, and again, these are reported abortions. And why are we belaboring this? Because you've got to understand the history of this thing. Okay, so throughout the decade of the 60s, up until 1969, and when you think about 1969, what was going on in the world? I mean, that was you had the hippie era, the free love, the rebel against the establishment. All of those things were going on. Man was now walking on the moon. The New York Mets won the World Series. Put things into perspective. You have all these things happening, and the rush toward rights and the rush toward rebellion is growing throughout the 60s. And during that period of time, you have a pretty significant jump from 4,000 to 23,000. That's per 1,000 births, 1.3 to 6.6 percentage of births versus abortions. Now you have in 1969 0.65% instead of just 1/100th of percent, up to 4.9. What happens in the next year, Jonathan?
In 1970, a huge jump, 193,000.
So from 23,000 to 193,000. That's 8 times the amount. Okay? And then what happens in 1971?
485,000.
So you have, again, another massive, massive jump. And now suddenly you're dealing with hundreds of thousands instead of hundreds. And that over just a period of just a few years. So as we look at the history of this procedure, one of the things that becomes obvious is you have this spike in growth. And you got to say, okay, well, what caused that spike in growth? And what does that mean for us? And Fred, why don't we do the break right at this point? Folks, we're talking about a very, very difficult subject. We're trying to put it on the table and have a discussion to really understand what's important here.
This is Jonathan and Rick with Christian Questions on News Talk 104.7 WXLM. Grab your Bibles. Don't go away. We'll be right back.